So October, November 2014. Let's start this. Which condition defines productive efficiency? So one says all factors of production are fully employed, and in fact one is wrong. But let me explain this in a bit. Let me get to A and D in just a bit. I think I've seen this question. In fact, let's cross out B and C first, because it says all firms are producing at their profit maximizing levels of output. No, again, productive efficiency, even if you look at it just for a firm, that used to be minimum average cost, and profit maximizing level of output for a firm used to be MC is equals to MR. So that might deviate from minimum average cost. So you can't say B. And substitution of capital for labor doesn't really have anything to do with it. Um, yeah, so like you can, B and C were clearly wrong. And the reason I left A and D is because I believe I've seen this question before. So a lot of people here got confused, because I think this question was circulating around on WhatsApp or something, that all factors of production are fully employed, which means you're operating on your PPC, which should mean that you are productively efficient. And I do agree with that. Like, if you're operating on your PPC, that indicates that the economy is productively efficient. However, at the same time, D says the output of all goods is produced at the lowest possible cost. And producing output at the lowest possible cost is also a case for productive efficiency. The reason you had to pick D over A was this particular word here, which condition defines productive efficiency. Now, A is an indication. If an economy is producing on PPC, it indicates that it is productively efficient. It is not necessarily the definition of it, of productive efficiency. The defining condition would be if the output of all goods is produced at the lowest possible cost. This is somewhat like similar, like saying there's like a price elastic demand would have a little different definition. It would have a definition somewhat around, proportionate change in price leads to a much larger proportionate change in quantity demanded. But at the same time, you could say if your PED is like greater than 1, this is also a case of price elastic demand. However, this is not necessarily the definition or the defining case, if that makes sense. So there's a difference between a defining condition and an indication of whether a situation has been met. Shreya, do you think that explanation makes sense? Okay. I believe I've done this question in my difficult MCQ playlist as well. I think that's where I saw it. Anyhow, a household makes the following purchases of fruit. The household derives twice as much utility from the 10th kg of apples as from the 5th kg of bananas. What should the household do to maximize utility from the purchase of these fruits? You don't really need to worry about quantity here, because, well, you have purchased 10 apples and you have purchased 5 bananas. So they're basically telling you the marginal utility. So like the utility you derive from the 10th kg of apples is obviously the marginal utility of apples, because that's for that particular kg. And they're saying that if you look at apples and bananas, for apples, you're like, let's say for bananas, you derive utility. The marginal utility you derive for the 5th kg is, let's say that is X. And for apples, for the 10th kg, again, we don't need to worry about which is 5th, which is 10th, because that's just how much you've produced. So you derive twice as much utility. What you should know, that marginal utility upon price has to be equal for both goods. So you have the marginal utilities here. You just need to divide it by price. So for bananas, the price was 1. For apples, the price is 0.5, which I believe should make this 4x, and this should be x, which clearly means that this is more than this. So you basically need to increase this, and you need to decrease this, this fraction basically. And how do you do so? If you increase the quantity of this, what happens? Your marginal utility goes down. So the fraction is reduced. If you decrease the quantity of this, your marginal utility goes up. Again, refer to the law of diminishing marginal utility. So this fraction is increased, and hence that's how they balance out. So for apples, you want to increase your purchase. And for bananas, you want to decrease your purchase, giving you A. In the diagram, a consumer budget line shifts from GH to JK. What must be correct? So what's happened is that you're buying more of Y, but you're buying less of X. So there has been an increase in the consumer's real income, and you can't say for sure because, well, you can, your real income might have gone up with regards to Y because you can purchase more of it, but your real income has gone down with regards to X because you can purchase less of it. So it's not a must be situation. We're not sure which particular good contributes more to, you know, increase or decrease in real income. Um, and if obviously you can't tell whether there has been an increase, you can't tell whether there's a decrease because it's going up for one good, it's going down for the other good. So we can't really tell what is the overall change. Anyhow, good Y has become relatively more expensive, and that is false because you're purchasing more units of good Y. If anything, the price of good Y might have gone down, or at least relative to X, because if it's cheaper or if it's relatively inexpensive, only then will you purchase more of it. So you can cross that out, leaving you with D. That good X has become relatively more expensive, which makes sense because you're now, if you're looking at it, you can previously buy this much, now you can buy less. So the quantity has gone down, which clearly means that the price, either relative to your income level or something of that sort, but it's relatively now more expensive. Now, the price of good X necessarily might not have changed, the money income could have changed, but the idea is still relative to your income level, it has become more expensive, right? um, a worker considering accepting a job she has been offered should draws up a list of annual monetary value she places on the advantages and disadvantages of the job. So you have income, which is a positive, which is an advantage. Dangerous working conditions is a negative. Long working hours is a negative. High prestige of the job is a positive. Uniform cost is a negative. Opportunity for travel is a positive. Short holidays is a negative. I believe it's a negative, right? Anyhow, so what can be concluded from the job? She values the pecuniary advantages more highly than the non-pecuniary advantages. So your pecuniary advantages would mainly be your income. So all the stuff that can be correct, that has an objective monetary value, so like income, bonuses, stuff of that sort. Non-pecuniary would include fringe benefits and all of that type of stuff. So if you look at advantages, pecuniary advantages is 750, and non-pecuniary advantages, you have 200 for this, you have 100 for this.
लेकिन we can't really tell कि value करती है कि नहीं करती because he hasn't said कि job ले रही है कि नहीं ले रही. Is considering it ना, so we don't really know value कर रही है कि नहीं कर रही, so this should be wrong. Can't conclude this from the table.
Well, whether or not she values advantages more than disadvantages, well, that's maybe a question, but we can tell whether she values pecuniary advantages more than non-pecuniary advantages because she's given monetary values based on how much she values them. But if you want, we can come back to this option in just a bit. We can look at the other options first. She would take the job even if it had none of the pecuniary advantages. Um, if you look at if you had none of the non-pecuniary advantages, you basically just be crossing out so like non-pecuniary advantages like high prestige of the job, you'll be crossing out opportunity to travel. And now to figure out whether she would take the job, you would just take your pecuniary, the only advantage left, that is the pecuniary advantage, that is income, 750, and then you just subtract all the pecuniary and non-pecuniary disadvantages because they've only talked about advantages here. So you minus 500, minus 250, minus 150. It's pretty clear, and minus 50. It's pretty clear your overall value would be negative, which means disadvantages would override advantages. So she would not take the job if it had none of the non-pecuniary advantages. Uh, the job has no pecuniary disadvantages. I don't believe that is true because if you think about it, dangerous working conditions, long working hours, these are all pecuniary disadvantages. So you can cross that out. The non-pecuniary advantages outweigh the non-pecuniary disadvantages. So we can look at that. Um, so with blue, I'll circle all the non-pecuniary advantages. So you have high prestige of job, and you have opportunity for travel. So that makes it 300 overall. And with green, I'll circle the non-pecuniary disadvantages. So you have dangerous working conditions, you have long working hours, uh, the cost of providing your own uniform, you can leave that because that's clearly a particular fixed value, right? So it's a particular monetary value that you can ascertain for sure. So it's a pecuniary disadvantage or not a non-pecuniary disadvantage. Short holidays. So this would clearly what be this would be like 800. So clearly this is wrong as well. The advantages that are non-pecuniary do not outweigh the disadvantages, and I believe that leaves you with A. Um,
I get
that
it. The values that you taste is obviously greater now.
Yeah, because we your pecuniary advantage here is just one, it's just income, but your that's 750. But your non-pecuniary advantages are like your high prestige of job, your opportunity for travel. But even if you add these two, it only is 300. So 750 is obviously more than 300, and she's placed monetary values according to how much she values it. So she values pecuniary advantages more than non-pecuniary advantages. To increase its labor force from 100 to 101, a firm has to increase its daily wage rate from 500 to 502. What is the marginal cost of labor per day? Um, so if you think about this, so to find marginal cost, you you take your new situation where you're paying 502 to 201 workers subtracted by the old situation, which is 500 into 100. And if you quickly put that into your calculator, you'll get your um, option, which is 702. The reason why I just circled 702 right away, because it seemed pretty obvious it wasn't going to be either one of these things. So like I'm like, okay. uh, Anyhow, the diagram shows an individual worker supply curve of labor. The hourly wage is W, and the worker is required to work a standard 40-hour week. Which area measures net improvement in the worker's welfare if he was allowed to choose the number of hours he wished to work per week? Now, the idea here is that the wage itself is fixed. However, the worker could um, pick his own how many hours he wishes to work. And obviously if the wage is fixed, how many hours he would wish to work at that particular wage is given to you um, by the supply curve. So he'd wish to work this many hours instead of 40 hours for that particular wage. So this particular area X, which was part of his transfer earnings, but wasn't getting paid that much. Remember, he was getting paid all of this before, so he wasn't getting paid X, although it was part of his transfer earnings. He wanted to get paid that. So that would be the increase in his welfare. The reason why we won't consider this blank area here, because well, he was getting paid this particular this blue area. So now, even though the blue area is not part of his transfer earnings anymore, it doesn't really matter because even when he was getting paid for it. So the only issue he had was this particular area X. Is that fine?
Um, I said that why shouldn't it be B?
Z minus X.
Yeah, yeah,
That
सही सही.
Yeah. In fact, it would be Z minus X if they had asked. If I think they had asked in some other paper, what is the economic rent if you work 40 hours. So the economic rent is Z, but X is basically an area that he's not getting paid, so that gets taken out of economic rent. But yeah. Okay, so question 7. A firm's workers join a trade union which negotiates an increase in the workers' wage rate. So wages go up. The increase in the wage rate results in an increase in the number employed by the firm, which usually happens if the firm is a monopsonist. The firm is a monopsonist within its local labor market. And the reason why that makes sense, I think if you draw the diagram, that would be clear. So you have wage, you have quantity. This is the demand for labor, but since the monopsonist is basically like a sole buyer of labor, so the demand for labor in the industry in the particular market would just basically be the demand for that particular firm, because there's only one firm that's buying that particular kind of labor. So it's basically the MRP of the monopsonist. So when you have your supply curve of labor and you have your MC of the monopsonist, um, uh, I think again, they haven't said the monopsonist is discriminating, so this is just simply a non-discriminating normal diagram. So you equate MC with MRP, you get the supply curve to figure out the output, the quantity of labor that you'll hire at whichever particular wage rate. Now, the idea here is if wage rate is pushed up, let's say to this particular point, then wages go up. And if you think about it, your quantity also goes up. So the number employed also increases, because the even if you go like go at that point, the idea still is that the additional cost of employing labor is still below the marginal revenue product um, of labor. So which is why this still works. So this is a very popular diagram for the monopsonist, and it's a very, I mean, this is a very common question. How can you increase the number employed and increase the wage rate? If you look at the other options, if the product is price elastic, then it's more difficult to increase the wage rate. They would unemploy more people because they can't pass on the burden in the form of higher prices that easily because it's price elastic. If it operates in a perfectly comparative labor market, that clearly means that it would reduce the number employed. If there's high degree of substitutability, it would reduce the number employed by a lot, because if labor got expensive, they'll just be like, okay, we can get rid of this labor and simply have substituted with capital instead. The table below shows the relationship between total output and total costs of a firm given constant factor prices and fixed factor proportions. Okay, so that basically the inputs are like more or less fixed. The factor prices are also fixed, and they're giving you total output and total cost. It follows that over this range of output, the firm experiences. Um, so if you look at this, so output, what's happening? Output is increasing uh, in all intervals by 100, and costs this increased by 60, then by 20, then by like 40. No, how much was this? What's 320 minus 180? 140. Sorry, my bad. Then by I believe what 180. Yeah. So um, you can't say it was decreasing or increasing throughout. I think we can cross that out, because initially, as you increased output, the cost decreased, then the cost increased. So you can say there would be increasing returns, because if you have increasing returns, only then are your costs gonna fall. Or Shaya, should we be looking at average cost here?
यार आई थिंक बस यही वाली कॉस्ट होनी चाहिए मतलब आई डोंट थिंक एनीथिंग एल्स शुड मैटर
Because as output increases, cost will. Well, we're basically looking at how the rate of. Yeah, I think you could also do this through average cost, because that would give you that would be become a little easier maybe. But over here, and what we're basically looking, because we're basically looking what we're looking at the in a way a margin, some sort of a marginal cost, like the change in cost if you change output. So we're looking at whether costs increases or by how much, and how how by what proportion when output increases. So that could also work. Yeah, so increasing returns of output, because, well, if you look at it, the costs are cost is increasing at a decreasing rate, which means your output had increasing returns, and there's decreasing returns for output at larger than 300, which makes sense because after 300 your cost goes up. Your cost starts increasing at an increasing rate. Obviously the cost is continuously, if you look at it, the cost is definitely increasing, but we're talking about the rate here. So that's the way you could do this. If you want to make it simpler, you could just try to figure out average cost, which is basically total cost divided by output, and look where that's increasing, where that's decreasing. That would just make things a little longer though. Anyhow, so question 9. In 2009, the UK's largest grocery supermarket, Tesco PLC, created Tesco Bank. Nice. Offering a range of financial services to customers. So this is an example of, well, I believe this is internal growth, right? Because they didn't merge with anyone. They just created this thing by themselves.
And like different boat diversification by the point.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say there's a market concentration. What would you say would be market concentration?
Yeah, I think more oligopolistic बन गया firm मतलब industry में.
Yeah, so like kind of like increased your market power, increased your market share. However, it's kind of going into it's going from now it was a supermarket, now it's created something that offers financial services, a bank. So obviously it's not increasing its market power in the same market, it's diversifying. So you can go with C. The PED for a firm's product is 0, so that should be price quantity. 0 means perfectly inelastic, so your demand curve here. Well, what will be the effect on the firm's revenue if it reduces price by 5%? So let's say this was your price. Your quantity won't change. So if your price decreased by, let's say, 5%, clearly your area also decreased by 5%. So your total revenue, which is basically your area, goes down by 5% because quantity won't change. So reduce price by 5%, the revenue won't be unchanged. The revenue will in fact decrease by 5%. So we can quickly check our check our answers for these 10 MCQs. All right, so the answers for these 10 MCQs were fine. We'll continue this paper in the next video.